Hello once again, my name is Cipyaar and this is Light Lore. Welcome back. Today we're going to learn about one of the most important houses in Westeros, and one that, through many questionable decisions, managed to take the Iron Throne for themselves. That's right, it's Light Lore Lannisters. The Lannisters, Wardens of the West, payers of debts, and occasionally the partakers of incest. Yep, these guys have an interesting history indeed. Now, the Lannisters are a principal house of Westeros. They had a big part in how Westeros was shaped, and an even bigger part in both Robert Baratheon's rebellion and reign of Aerys Targaryen. House Lannister's symbol is a lion on a red background, and their house motto is Hear Me Roar, although they have a kind of motto which is the Lannister always pays his debts. Now this doesn't mean he pays his debts in like gambling kind of thing, this also is a kind of sign of revenge, and can be traced back to a battle that Tywin was in that we'll discuss later on during the video. They're fair-haired, tall and handsome. The Lannisters also have the blood of the Andals coursing through their veins, and this is partially due to their female kind of line. The Andals were discussed in the last video. They are along with their children of the forest and their first men. So if you want to learn more about them, just go to that and you can have a look at that. But they're basically kind of barbaric people who took over the first men's land and tried to taught them new religions. They chased away the children of the forest, or what was left of children of the forest at the time, and they were pretty badass indeed, for all the wrong reasons. The main keep of the Lannisters is Casterly Rock, and this is something that through the TV show and through the books as well can be seen through discussion. You can see that Tyrion wants Casterly Rock because it's his birthright since Jaime joined the King's Guard, and Tywin doesn't want to give it to him because Tywin had to fight very hard to get it himself. Again, we'll talk about that in depth during the video. And their land is to the far west of the continent, as I said earlier, as they are the Wardens of the West. Through their female line, it is said that the Lannisters descend from Lann the Cleaver, who was a legendary trickster during the Age of Heroes. It's said that he managed to swindle Casterly Rock from his previous owners and claim it as his home. Lann also founded the Lannister house, and was the first of his namesake. Bards and storytellers would tell of how he stole the light from the sun to colour his hair, and how he was a silver-tongued person. He was a very big icon at the time during the First Men. And it's also weird, because most of the Lannisters are said to have descended from the Andals, but Lann himself descended from the First Men, and then his daughters would have married into the Andals as they invaded afterwards. The last King of the Rock was Loren Lannister, who bent the knee to Aegon the Conqueror when he invaded. This was during the Battle of Field of Fire. When the Targaryens took over, it's said that they threw the Lannisters out of Casterly Rock, but they allowed them to have a kind of prime political position. The relationship between the Targaryens and the Lannisters got better over time, until it was like the Baratheons and the Starks. The Lannisters had a secondary role beside the Targaryens, but a lot of people recognise them as the primary thing, and that was hated by the Targaryens. They always wanted to be at the forefront, they always wanted to be in charge, which was one of the reasons they took over Westeros. Now, in the Lannister house, there were two main people, and two people who shaped the way the Westeros and their house changed, and these were Tytos and Tywin. Now, you'll know a lot about Tywin since you've seen the show and read books, but Tytos was actually Tywin's father. In a way, Tytos and Tywin were polar opposites. You see, Tytos was called a kind but weak man. He would loan money to lords who never bothered to repay him, and bannermen who were under his command would just laugh at him and wouldn't follow any of his orders and treat him as a friend more than anything. Now, Tytos hated this, and one of the main people who disrespected him, who didn't follow his orders, and who rebelled more than anyone was Lord Tarbeck. Now, Tytos, under a rash decision, decided to imprison Lord Tywin. Now, Tywin probably convinced him to do this because even from an early age, Tywin was a cold bastard. In retaliation, Lady Tarbeck imprisoned 3 Lannisters. Among them was Stafford Lannister. She sent a messenger to Tytos demanding the return of her husband and threatening revenge to any wrongdoing that might befell Tytos. Tywin suggested that Lord Tarbeck be sent back in 3 pieces, each for one of the Lannisters, but Tytos disagreed with this. This was against his nature, and Tytos just let Tarbeck go. This good deed not gone unpunished. You see, House Tarbeck, with the help of House Rain, rebelled once again against the Lannisters. But it was not Tytos who crushed the rebellion, it was indeed Tywin. And this is what I was talking about before. This is the battle that made Tywin a main part of Westeros' history. You see, this is where the song The Rains of Castamere comes from, because Tywin charged in with his army and killed both House Rain and House Tarbeck, extinguishing everybody in the family. After this rebellion had been crushed, things were a lot simpler for the Lannisters. They had little rebellions and little fights with other people, to the point that Lord Tytos became fat and obsessed with the loins of steak and the loins of women, even going as far is to marry a common woman after his wife had died. The influence Titus had on his son was that Tywin mistreated Laughter, as his father was made fun of quite a lot in barracks and in inns, and just by general people of Casterly Rock. This made Tywin a heartless shrew, hating his own children, hating everybody who was disrespectful to the Lannisters. Tywin also seldom smiled when he was young, and never smiled again after his wife Joanna died. Upon his father's death, Tywin became even more cold than before, and this can be proved by one incident. You see, after Lord Titus had died, his mistress still lived, and had a prime position in Casterly Rock. And she was a lowborn common woman, as I said before. Now Tywin caught her trying on one of his late mother's clothes, and to punish her, he stripped her and made her walk across the streets, confessing her crime to everybody, and then banished her from Casterly Rock. Tywin was then master of Casterly Rock. Sometime later, through arranged marriage, Tywin and Joanna married. They were both cousins, and they had twins, Cersei and Jaime. Now Tywin had high hopes for Cersei and Jaime, and he wanted to redeem the Lannister name. He wanted Jaime to be Lord of Casterly Rock, and he wanted Cersei to be Queen of Westeros. But disaster struck when his beloved wife died giving birth to Tyrion, and this is why Tyrion is hated by Tywin so much. Partially because he's dwarf, deformed, and an embarrassment to the house, and then partially because he killed his beloved wife, the only thing that ever made him happy. Tywin was so devastated that he never married again, never smiled, and never, ever showed any love to Tyrion. Now it is shown, Jaime Lannister once told his nephew Tyrion that the best part of Tywin died when Joanna did, and the last bit of humanity in Tywin's soul was gone. You see, Cersei and Jaime began their incest at an early age, especially for that time. And then Cersei, while a young maid, visited the woods and saw a person called Maggie the Frog, who shared portions of Cersei's future, and planted seeds of paranoia saying that she would get killed by someone. Cersei then got to a point where she murdered her best friend, who had witnessed the prophecy. Tyrion, when 13 years old, was out with Jaime when he met and married a girl named Tysha. When Tywin discovered that Tyrion wed Tysha the whore, he decided to teach his son a sharp lesson. And by sharp lesson, I mean he made the King's Guard Raber for 1 silver at a person, and then made Tyrion have sex to her for 1 gold coin. This was to show that the Lannisters were above everybody else, and that his so-called wife was still a whore, even with her new betrothed.
And it is past time you were wed.
I was wed. Oh, don't you remember?
Only too well.
Tywin's military ability came to the attention of King Aerys II, and he was ordered to leave Casterly Rock, go to King's Landing, and become Hand to the King. He was 20 at this time, and it was a great honour for both him and House Lannister. Tywin proved himself doing this. He held the position for 20 years, and a lot of people judged that he was the rightful king, and King Aerys was just there for show. It all ended when Aerys' increasing jealousy and paranoia drove Tywin away. According to Sir Barristan Selmy, it is said that King Aerys lusted after Tywin's wife, but Tywin loved her too much and would not let her go anywhere near him, nor let Aerys go near her. Now this was at the time that Aerys' unhappy marriage was arranged, which caused further friction between both the Hand of the King and the King himself. Aerys did many things to get back at Tywin, one of those being he would not let Cersei marry Rhaegar, but he also made Jaime join the King's Guard, which meant that Jaime could not be heir to Casterly Rock. This crushed Tywin, and meant that he had no heir, apart from Tyrion, the person he hated, and there's no way he'd let him run Casterly Rock. In a way, Jaime was being held hostage by Aerys. He could not marry, he could not have a family, he couldn't be heir to Casterly Rock, he couldn't do much in the form of a personal life. So Tywin made one final decision. Tywin resigned as Hand of the King and returned back to Casterly Rock. When Robert's rebellion began, Tywin saw a key moment for revenge. You see, Robert was going to go kill Aerys and all the Targaryens, and Tywin had been called multiple times to help them and save the family, but he refused, sitting in Casterly Rock and waiting for the key moment to claim to help Robert.
My father arrived first, the whole Lannister army at his back, promising to defend the city against the rebels. I knew my father better than that. It's never been one to pick the losing side. I told the Mad King as much. I urged him to surrender peacefully. king didn't listen to me. He didn't listen to Varys, who tried to warn him. But he did listen to Grand Maester Pycelle, that grey sunken cunt. You can trust the Lannisters, he said. The Lannisters have always been true friends of the crown. So we opened the gates and my father sacked the city. Once again, I came to the king, begging him to surrender. He told me to bring him my father's head. Then he turned to his pyromancer. Burn them all, he said.
Tywin just sat at Castle Rock. He saw a key moment for revenge, and it wouldn't even involve betrayal. He could just sit there, ignore all of Aerys' attempts of communication, and then say to Robert that he was on Robert's side. He would be alive, and he would have revenge against someone who would put his family against him. And this is exactly what he did. After Robert's decisive victory at the Battle of the Trident, Tywin mustered his forces and rode to the capital just at the end. To prove that he was loyal, he ran in, said that he would help Aerys, but instead killed everybody in King's Land. Tywin did what he had to do to survive, killing the babies of the Targaryens. Tywin wrapped the bodies of the babies in a red flag to both hide the blood and show the Lannister flag. From then on, the Lannisters and the Baratheons had a strong relationship, to the point that Robert married Cersei and Tywin finally got what he wanted. Now many people might ask, why didn't Tywin just let Robert kill the babies? He would have done it himself. And this was his response. We came too late to Robert's cause. It was necessary to demonstrate our loyalty. When I laid those bodies before the throne, no men could doubt that we had forsaken House Targaryen forever, and Robert's relief was palpable. As stupid as he was, even he knew Rhaegar's children had to die if his throne was to ever be secure. Yet he saw himself as a hero, and would never kill children. So in a sense, that was the only way that Tywin could gain Robert's trust, and House Baratheon's trust, is if he killed the babies. And that's the only way that Robert could be on throne, and therefore Cersei could be on throne. Due to the fact that Robert was never good with money, and that Tywin was now connected to the throne, Castle Rock was always lending money to the crown. They lent over 3 million gold dragons, and the crown itself was in debt to them to such an extent that they could never pay them back. And this put Tywin in a good place, because Robert and House Baratheon, and King Landon in a way, always owed him this thing that they could never repay him, so he would always have power above them. Skip forward a few years, and you've got Robert. Robert's on the throne with Cersei still, and they have had 3 children. They have Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen. Now, Myrcella and Tommen are kind of secondary characters. They're in the background, they've got not much dialogue, apart from in like the first few episodes of The Lannisters are in Winterfell, and nothing really happens to them so far. I don't know if there'll be big like things happening to them later on in the series, later on in the books, but so far they're kind of in the background, not doing much. But Joffrey is their eldest child, and he's a main character in the whole story, from the get-go actually. He's the love child from Cersei and Jaime, who are brother and sister, therefore he's inbred, and that probably explains a lot of the problems with him, a lot of mental issues. But no one knows that, or at least no one's supposed to know that Jaime and Cersei had him as a son. Everybody thinks it was Robert. But there are some people who kind of know he's inbred, and know that he doesn't have a kind of claim to the throne. Because if he's Jaime and Cersei's son, he's got none of Robert's blood in him. And since Robert was the king, that's the only reason that the Lannisters could have any real power. Because I mean, I don't know what would happen if there was no son, no daughters, and it was just Cersei. I don't know if she'd take over after that, or whether it'd be Stannis or Renly. But yeah, now you're up to date on the Lannisters' history. Now you know a little bit more than you did, hopefully. If you haven't read the books, you'll definitely know more than if you haven't read the books. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, good for you. If you didn't, that's a shame. And I'll see you in the next light little video. Farewell, and may the 7 gods bless you.